start the... Okay, so Madri, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, boss. My name is Madri, and I am working as an assistant professor in the Department of Linguistics at University of Lucknow. And I have worked with Professor Dr. Gabriela Ilieva as her language teaching assistant during my Fulbright fellowship in 2014 and 15. Since then, I have been working with her on some project or the other, off and on. And I'm extremely grateful that she has given me the chance to do this here as well. As it says here, that I will be talking about the linguistic features and structures at the superior level. I have seen already that during the first hour of this particular these sessions, that you already know that there is already the understanding or the knowledge of what features and structures are used at the superior level. I will be just reiterating. I'm guessing I'll be reiterating them because all of you know that these things already. And as Gabriela ji said, that there are these issues, for example, the issue at hand, the water conservation and pollution, etc. These issues are complicated, and therefore the language which is used to talk about these issues, describe these issues, is also complicated, and that's why we start at the superior level. And like I said, and like boss said also, that all of these features which we are talking about as features of the superior level, all of these features also exist or are also available for a student who is, let's say, just going or just starting at the beginner's level. But it all depends on the usage of these features, and it also depends on the context in which these features and the language is used at these different levels as well. So keep that in mind, and it might seem that some of these features are, like very common and very basic and taught at the first level, but again, like I said, it all depends on how it is used and the context in which it is used. So before we delve straight into the linguistic features and structures at the superior level, again, it's not moving. Why is it not moving? Okay, right, thank God. So before we delve into the grammatical features, the syntactical features, I would like to talk about a few terms which are essential, at least at the superior level, because we might think of language as this one abstract entity, but there are so many different variations of the same language, not just at the regional level, because we all know about regional variations. I mean, kshetriya differences ke it's okay if I speak in Hindi as well, right? I mean,
from time to time you can, okay, but make sure it's not exclusive.
All right. Okay, so like I said, when we talk about language, or when we talk about language at a superior level, we tend to think of it, or when we talk about language itself, we tend to think of it as this one abstract entity. It is not. It differs not just on the regional level. For example, we know about regional variations, kshetriya bhasha, we know about accent, etc. But we also need to look at the different ways in which society impacts it, and like we have been talking about, context affects a particular language. So we will talk about idiolects, we talk about sociolects, style and register, we talk about high and low varieties of language, and then we will talk about the selected grammatical features which are common in high registers in Hindi. And then we'll have a few examples of high register, and then we'll move on to a small exercise which I want to do. Now, an idiolect is an individual's unique use of language, including speech. Just one second, I had prepared something for this. I would like to share that with you guys as well. All right. Now, this is something which I have prepared, which will be, I hope that you will be able to understand it. This is an example of a higher register. It's an example of a superior level of and it is quite meta, because I am talking about language and I am talking about idiolect using the higher version, or using the higher superior level and the higher register of Hindi, which is available to me at this moment. Like I said, idiolect is an individual's unique use of language, including speech. Now, in this individual's unique use of language, there are so many things which come in, so many things which affect an individual's use of language. And idiolect or style may there is a difference, but we'll reach there soon. But before that, let me tell you this. Let me please know that if you do not understand something. भाषा एक निश्चित समुदाय के सदस्यों द्वारा परस्पर और सर्वसम्मति से सहमत कोड का एक समूह है. Language is a system of codes, a body of a code. It's which has been created by a consensus of people who use that particular language. परिभाषा के अनुसार ही भाषा लोगों के समूह का सामूहिक उत्पाद है. It's a common product, किसी एक व्यक्ति विशेष का नहीं. हालांकि प्रत्येक व्यक्ति कई कारकों से प्रभावित होकर अपने जीवन में ऐसे कई चयन करता है जो उस वक्ता के लिए एक विशिष्ट भाषा का संस्करण तैयार करती है. A human being, any person is affected by a number of different reasons which lead that person in order to finalize that one version of language which that person speaks or uses. एक व्यक्ति द्वारा बोली जाने वाली और किसी एक विशिष्ट भाषा के इस संस्करण को इडियोलेक्ट कहा जाता है, which is the definition which I have shared with you guys. इडियोलेक्ट अर्थात व्यक्ति बोली, it's called व्यक्ति बोली in हिंदी, भाषा की वे किस्में हैं जिन पर एक व्यक्ति की निपुणता होती है. You are an expert in that version of the language. एक भाषा के प्रत्येक व्यक्ता के पास विभिन्न सामाजिक संदर्भों में in different social contexts, every speaker of a language has a version of that language that they can create or they can produce like this. For example, the language that you use, you have different versions of the language, you have different versions within yourself which you use in different social contexts. उदाहरण के लिए एक छात्र शिक्षक के साथ बात करते समय अलग शब्दों, बोलने के लहजे और यहाँ तक कि भाषा की वाक्य संरचना का भी चयन करता है. While any speaker, a student is speaking to their teacher, the choice of words, the vocabulary that they use, even the sentence structure and the accent and the way they speak to their teacher is going to be different than when they are doing it with their friends, when they're using the language with their friends. दोनों ही संदर्भों में प्रयुक्त भाषा की अलग अलग शैलियां व्यक्ति बोली का उदाहरण है. इडियोलेक्ट पर समाज के तत्व जैसे वर्ग, लिंग, जाति अर्थात आर्थिक स्थिति एवं क्षेत्रीय और राजनीतिक प्रभाव व्यक्ति विशेष के इडियोलेक्ट की संरचना करते हैं. So things like social class, gender, caste, economic conditions, economic class, as well as regional and political reasons affect a person's choice of an idiolect. Now you see all these different pictures, all these different people on your screen. The moment you talk about Shah Rukh Khan, you have an idea of how Shah Rukh speaks and what kind of language he uses, his body language, his facial expressions, etc. All of these things together make his or her idiolect. Whenever I'm teaching idiolect to my classroom, in my class, I always give the example of Kim Kardashian. All of you, I'm sure, are familiar with her and the language that she uses. In fact, one of the things which she uses she is also famous for neologisms which she has introduced into the English language, which are very popular among the Instagram generation and the TikTok generation. For example, she uses this one word called okr instead of okay or something else. And it is very typical and very specific to Kim K, and it has been adopted by the other sisters as well. But that is her idiolect, and that is a part of her idiolect. Similarly, Matthew McConaughey has a very distinctive style of speaking and distinctive way, like the usage of phrases like all right, and the whistle, the Texas whistle, which he has in the pronunciation of the sound of sir. Similarly, I have this very interesting joke which I wanted to share, which was this one simple phrase. This will also come up when we are talking about linguistic style. That Gulzar, we all know Gulzar and we all know the way he writes, and it's very Urdu heavy. So this very simple sentence of pani pila do ya pani la do, how will Gulzar say pani la do? He will say that रूह का परिंदा फड़फड़ाए प्यास में, कोई उम्र तक फड़फड़ाए, कोई चांद से बूंद टपका दे कोई, or something similar like that. This was a joke which was shared in a classroom once when I was talking about idiolect. So I thought that I should share this with you as well. Now, when we talk about idiolect, when idiolect is an individual's version, a sociolect is the version of a social group, the version of the variation of a language which is used by a social group. A sociolect is a form of language, a non-standard dialect. And when I say dialect, I mean a language variation. It has a restricted register or a set of lexical items which are used by a particular socioeconomic class, a profession, an age group, or any other social group. Now, you might have an example of a sociolect is, now, like we can see that social class, socioeconomic class is a very important factor which affects sociolects. So I don't know if you guys have seen this series or not. This one, it's called The Fabulous Lives of Bollywood Wives. And these are a few, it's like there is a parallel series in the US as well. I don't remember. Housewives, The Housewives of Beverly Hills or something like that. So it's a very similar format here in India, and the language which is used by the women or by the characters of this particular show, it is a very different language. The vocabulary used is very different. The contexts in which they use the language is very different. And if you have ever seen it, if you can, then I would recommend looking at one episode to understand what I'm talking about. Similarly, women, the language used by certain women, language used by women to talk about certain issues is very different, and is very the register is very different. So that is a different sociolect. And in a similar way, like we see in the socioeconomic class of laborers who are working, that is also something which is a different version of the language depending on the social context in which it is used. Now, वक्ताओं द्वारा प्रयोग की जाने वाली भाषा को प्रभावित करने वाला एक प्रमुख कारक समाज है. Society is an important factor, is a major factor in which affects a person's language use. मनुष्य समाज में रहते हुए उसके नियमों और परंपराओं का इस तरह से पालन करता है कि धीरे धीरे यही रीति रिवाज उनकी आदत में परिवर्तित हो जाते हैं. इस तरह की कंडीशनिंग उनकी भाषा के साथ साथ मानव जीवन के कई पहलुओं को प्रभावित करती है. यह प्रभाव इतना अधिक होता है कि समाज के विभिन्न पहलुओं द्वारा प्रभावित भाषा का संस्करण सोशियोलेक्ट कहलाता है. A sociolect emerges due to the influence of a number of social factors, for example, social class, gender, age group, profession, caste, etc. Sociolects involve both passive acquisition of particular communicative practices through association with a local community, as well as active learning and choice among speech or writing forms to demonstrate identification with particular groups. The term sociolect might refer to socially restricted dialects, but it is sometimes also treated as equivalent with the concept of register or used in place of jargon and slang. Now, style and register, the next item that we need to talk about is style and register. Now, style is defined as a way of doing something. In language, how you speak and more importantly, how you write is a part of your linguistic style. A style is not a sociolect or a regional variation of the language, but a conscious choice of a variety of language for a specific purpose. This style is specifically seen when we look at writers. For example, Premchand has a style. Like we said, Gulzar has a style. Dinkar has a style, Nirala has a style. All these people have different styles. In fact, I don't know if it has ever happened to you or not, but this one time I was giving an entrance examination for entrance into the Lady Shri Ram College of Delhi University, and they had an unseen passage, and it was actually from Ibsen's a play by Ibsen called Doll's House. I had not read Doll's House, but I had read Ghosts. But because I was familiar with his writing style, I was able to understand that probably Doll's House has been written by Ibsen, and it did help me in answering a few of the questions. So style is when style talks about the conscious choice of words, the conscious choice of words, but even though I say that it is conscious, after a prolonged time, that conscious choice of words becomes subconscious, and in fact, you are able to identify a person based on their style of speaking and their style of writing. This can be identified. For example, sometimes there is a prank call. Somebody does a prank call to you, and you are able to identify that this person is not speaking the way they do usually. So probably this is not, like, if the person is pretending to be someone else, that is not the person who is actually calling you. So that is where style is used by you in the most common or in the most everyday examples or everyday situations. In social linguistics, register is a variety of language used for particular purpose or in a particular communicative situation.
Hold on. Can you hold on a second? What I want to say at this point is that style is something that, because we know what it includes, these rhetorical choices that define an individual way of using language, we as language teachers, especially with heritage learners, bringing them up to a higher level beyond advanced low, needs that we need to give them these specific chunks of language that they can appropriate and own in order to define their own style. But before
develop their own style, yes.
Exactly. But before that, we make them aware of what a style means, of an editorial, of an author, of a, let's say, journalist, and so forth. Excellent. Thank you.
Yep. So in social linguistics, register is a variety of language used for particular purpose or in particular communicative situations. Like I said, I was going to talk about editorials right here. An editorial is a very specific body of writing. You are writing an editorial. There is a topic. You started with something. There is a topic sentence. There is a topic paragraph. Then you build your arguments, and then you conclude. There is a very set flow to writing an editorial, and there is a set language. You cannot write an editorial in informal language. So in that particular communicative situation, the register that you will be using of that variety of language is going to be superior, is going to be high. For example, when speaking officially or in a public setting, an English speaker may be more likely to follow prescriptive norms of formal usage than in a casual setting. One example which I want to give is, for example, is when let's say there is a conference happening, and you have to introduce the keynote speaker, something which is I haven't seen it anymore, because usually the introductions are done in English, but whenever I have seen it done in Hindi, whenever the person or the keynote speaker is introduced, even though the keynote speaker, you need to talk about that person in the third person, the honorific pronoun, the second person honorific pronoun of aap is used, which is indicating as if you are talking to the person face to face, but you are not really talking to the person face to face. You are addressing the audience and you are introducing a speaker, yet you will use the second person honorific pronoun of aap while introducing that person. For example, aap Bhasha Vigyan Vibhag mein pradhyapak ke roop se karyarat hain, which is again a fancier way of saying that you work in the Department of Linguistics. Anyway, so that is a structure, or that is something that is a prescriptive norm which is followed, that in this particular communicative situation you will be using the honorification and you will be using the second person pronoun. Now, style and register are used simultaneously, the only difference being that in strict definitional standards by paribhashik taur par, register refers to the choice of vocabulary and syntax by a speaker in a communicative situation, while style refers to all of this, like vocabulary and syntax, and the choice of sounds, intonation, and other prosodic features. Also, one second. Also, the difference of individual styles are more notable in written language than in spoken language. But that doesn't mean that there is no difference in spoken languages. There is still difference, and that is, like Gabrielaji said, that is what we need to let our students know. That is what we need to prepare them for. It's not moving again. Okay. Now, high and low varieties of language. This is something which is known as diglossia. Diglossia is when there is one language and it exists in different variations in a society, but depending on social situations, the different varieties are used. I'll give you an example. One of my students was working on his PhD thesis, and he was working on diglossia in Urdu, in Aligarh actually. And he had discovered, he surmised in his thesis that the Urdu which was used in masjids among men while in a formal meeting was extremely different from the Urdu used among the same men outside the masjid. In fact, he had done a syntactic analysis and he had figured out how the Urdu which was used outside the masjid had so many Avadhi words and Avadhi constructions and Avadhi, for example, there is the Avadhi construction of Han. There is an Avadhi the syntactic construction in which the verb ends in han, and that is also used in Urdu. Like the words used, or some of the constructions used are Urdu, and some of the constructions used were Avadhi. So that version of Avadhi, that version of Urdu which was used outside the masjid, is obviously the lower version or the low prestige variety, because it is not used in the formal setting, or it is not used in the religious setting of being inside in a masjid. So there are high varieties and low varieties, and that is yeah. And in fact, I recently saw the movie Saudagar also, in which I had seen that if you remember Saudagar, if you have seen Saudagar, we know that there are these two people, Rajkumar and Dilip Kumar. And Rajkumar is obviously, he is the high upper caste person and he is the richer person, and Dilip Kumar portrays the young, the poor gaon wala person. And there is this one sentence in which Dilip Rajkumar says कि आज तक वो अपनी भाषा नहीं सुधार पाया है. And in fact, the language which Dilip Kumar uses is a version of Avadhi. It's a very simplified version of Avadhi, which the Rajkumar uses. And there are some Bhojpuri words and Bhojpuri constructions also thrown in. But that is something which they had done. And in fact, he says कि हम ऐसा करत रहें, and Manisha Koirala, who is the heroine of the movie, she corrects him and says ki Dada, it's not karat rahe, it's karta raha. So she actually says this ki aise mat bolo, aise bolo. So there is, again, obviously these high and low varieties of language. And yes, usually the higher register reflects the higher variety, and the higher register, especially as far as Hindi is concerned, the higher register is made up of more Sanskritized words and some Persianized and Arabic words as well in the higher variety. Now, again, finally we are here at the common, at the syntactic features which are seen in the higher registers. Now, conjunctions is something which everybody knows, which students learn from, I think, from the beginners, like later parts of the beginners level themselves. But conjunctions, why are conjunctions so common in higher registers, is because higher registers have complex sentences. The sentences, they have more clauses, the larger number of clauses, larger number of phrases, and there are more joiners and connectors of these clauses and these phrases which are there. Now, there are mostly declarative sentences whenever we are, for example, even when you're talking about pollution, agar aap ya fir water conservation ke bare mein agar aap baat kar rahe hain, and you're talking about dams, and you say ki Jawaharlal Nehru ne Bhakra Nangal Dam banwaya tha. Now, this is a declarative sentence. It's a statement of a fact which was there. In this simple sentence, we will not just see that we'll see the causative verb, but that will come later. But for the time being, what I want to talk about, how it has declarative sentences. And when there are a number of declarative sentences, it is easier for you to, or it is easier for the speaker or the writer to give a sense of a higher register, give a sense of a more formal sentence structure by joining these ideas together and creating a longer or a complex sentence. Let me give you an example. I'll have to stop the share here. I just came across this sentence, which is really interesting, which I want to share. Okay, so this says, the sentence is in Hindi. I'll say the sentence in Hindi, and this is a very long sentence. It has a number of different clauses, and it has joiners in these in the sentence. For example, पितृसत्तात्मक समाज में बोले जाने वाली भाषा में प्रयुक्त संबोधन शब्द के रूप में यह अध्ययन का विषय है कि क्या श्रीमती शीर्षक उस महिला की वैवाहिक स्थिति के कारण सम्मान व्यक्त करता है, या क्या यह बिना किसी पितृसत्तात्मक असबाब के सिर्फ एक अतिरिक्त जानकारी का वाहक मात्र है. This is a longish sentence. It has so many different clauses, and they are joined together by things like yah, ki, ka mein choti ki matra, ya, kya yah, bina, at the question, and in the end ek अतिरिक्त जानकारी का वाहक मात्र है. So there are 5 clauses which I counted, and all of these together were joined together by connectors. So even though we have, wait a second, let's share it again. So so conjunctions are extremely important or extremely beneficial when it comes to developing a higher register, because you are teaching them how to join different phrases together, because joining sentences and joining phrases and joining clauses are 2 different ball games altogether. Sentences you can probably join with or, yeah, etc. But in order to join clauses, you will need a higher understanding of which conjunctions to use. Now, the 3 main ways to join clauses and make complex sentences are the relative pronouns, yah, bah, jo, jahan. वहां जो बैठा है वो मेरा भाई है, वो लड़का मेरा भाई है, जो वहां बैठा है वो लड़का मेरा भाई है, जिसका, जिसने, जिससे, जैसे, etc. Then we also have conjunctions, the usual and the simpler conjunctions like kyunki, taki, and taki, and the higher level conjunctions like jabki, halaki, agar, to, yadi. And obviously, we can also see that these are also some of these conjunctions will also be used in the making of conditional sentences. For example, this is the conditional sentences, or the use of conditionals in higher level, in a higher register. I think you will be able to observe it more during when you are doing your pollution and water conservation exercises or lesson. You'll be making those lesson plans, because lots of those things will require conditions. Conditional sentences, if we do not conserve water, so and so will happen. If all the resources die out, so and so will happen. So there will be a number of conditional sentences that you will be required to, the students will be required to create if they need to talk about this, these high register topics. Then we have participle constructions. Now, all of us know what participles...
Hold on. Can you elaborate a little bit on what is possible within a conditional sentence context and what is not possible, like the contrary to fact conditionals? If
I don't get it. Could you do it? I'll pick it up from there, because I don't understand.
We wouldn't have gotten the water if we wouldn't have blocked the river. So the contrary to fact, we did block the river and we did get the water, but I'm assuming here in my sentence, contrary to fact, and this is Hindi mein, for foreign language learners, this is the most difficult part, the contrary to fact, which is, I guess, ESL, whoever among our teachers teaches ESL, it's also very difficult for foreign language learners to acquire this one, to master this one.
Counterfactual?
Yes.
Yeah.
अगर ऐसे होता तो ये होता,
अगर ऐसा होता, अगर ऐसा ना होता तो, अगर ऐसा ना होता, अगर हमने पानी को ना रोका होता तो अकाल ना पड़ता.
So here you need the past participle with the hota, so that you can show that it's in the past, it was something that was not actually, I mean, the contrafactual is really interesting. So that's something that we're going to hear a lot, and it's a context, a topic and a context that we can teach this higher level of syntax skills our students. So thank you for the conditionals, definitely.
Yeah. Then we can move on to the participle constructions. Now, participles, we all know that these are verbal forms which have they have the verbal information, as well as they have an extra piece of information, like they probably work as an adjective or an adverb or even a conjunctive sometimes. Now, of the different participle constructions, these I think that these will be used specifically in the context of the project that you guys are involved in. For example, pollution and water conservation, etc. So imperfect participle, which is the verbal form plus he, to donate as soon as. For example, as soon as, जैसे ही धरती पर पानी खत्म होगा, वैसे ही, मनुष्य के लिए जीवन जीना मुश्किल हो जाएगा. Perfective participle with बिना और बगैर to express without. पानी के बिना धरती पर मनुष्य जीवन सफल नहीं हो सकता. The imperfective participle plus समय or वक्त to convey while ing or at the time of like we can have a sentence करते समय हाँ पानी का अपव्यय करते समय किसी ने नहीं सोचा था कि 10 साल में पृथ्वी की इतनी बुरी हालत हो जाएगी. ठीक. Imperfective participle plus a measure of time to indicate the passage of time since the beginning completion of any beginning or the completion of an activity or a situation, and then reduplicated participle करते करते रुक जाना या पानी वेस्ट करते करते हमने पानी पानी वेस्ट करते करते हमने इतना समय खो दिया कि अब हमारे पास और कोई रास्ता नहीं बचा है. So different ways करते करते is the reduplicated imperfective participle. पानी वेस्ट करते करते हाँ रुक जाना. ठीक है. All right. Sorry. All right. So these are some examples of the perfective and imperfective participles which I have taken from advanced Hindi grammar by Usha Jain. You can look at the examples and you can look at the definitions of that is given in the book. Imperfective and perfective participles. The imperfective is it describes an action that is in progress, like food that is being cooked, khana, pakta hua khana, and perfective is obviously the action has been completed, pakka hua khana. So गिरता हुआ पानी, गिरा हुआ पानी, खिलता हुआ फूल, खिला हुआ फूल, etc. And then obviously the formation, how do we form perfective participles? We use they've both formed by you adding the suffix a or e. For example, रहना का verb stem रह है तो उसका perfective participle बनता है रहा या रहे या रही. Moving on, we have also the conjunctive participle. Now Hindi, obviously we know that it uses the conjunctive participle with the kar construction to link two sequential actions performed by the same subject. Subject same hota hai, and then obviously we have two sequential actions. जैसे कोई घर आता है, लड़की घर आई और सो गई. So these are two sequential actions, and we are joining them together using the construction kar. So the conjunctive participle is also, I think, something which is of a higher register because obviously it joins sequential actions. Now, specifically when we are talking about pollution, when we are talking about water conservation, there are so many actions that need to be there's so many actions that need to be taken. Individual actions, actions at the individual level, actions at the government level, at the policy level, actions at let's say multinational level or multinational cooperational level. So when we are talking about these different actions, I think when we are talking about sequence, when we have to put them in sequence, the conjunctive participle is something that we will require to talk about such actions. For example, लड़की घर गई और सो गई, लड़की घर जाकर सो गई. हमें पानी का कंजर्वेशन, पानी का रख रखाव के बारे में सोचकर देश नहीं something similar. I'm sorry, the example is, I had thought about an example, but it's escaping me right now. If anybody can think of an example which will join two sequential actions with reference to the context that you guys are involved in your project, I will be very happy if you just put that in a sentence and put it in an example and write it in the chat box. Conjunctive participles are formed by adding kar or k. Although kar and k can be used interchangeably, kar is used more in formal and written language. It's not k kar ke nahi hota, matlab so ke nahi hota, so kar ya kha kar, while k is frequently used in spoken language. The verb stem is kar itself, then the conjunctive participle can be formed with only k. Kar is not possible. However, kar karakar is possible. That is interesting actually. There's something which, but kar karakar is again a very informal phrase which I have just shared. I don't think it's used. It is in fact not used formally. In colloquial speech, the verb stem may also be followed by karke. पानी खत्म करके हम लोग मार्च चले जाएंगे. ठीक. Okay. Then we come to something which is extremely common and extremely useful when we are talking about when we are speaking of anything in a higher register, the passive voice. Now, the passive voice is used for a number of different purposes, but some of the purposes which I could think of is, number one is to focus on the action rather than the actor. भारत ने कॉमनवेल्थ गेम्स में 102 पदक भारत द्वारा कॉमनवेल्थ उसमें गेम्स में 102 पदक जीते गए. So it's the focus is on the जीतना, 102 पदक जीतना. It's not on the action rather than the it's on the action, it's not on the actor. The focus on the main object, to focus on the object instead of the subject. परमवीर चक्र प्रदान किया गया. So and so को परमवीर चक्र प्रदान किया गया. So we are concentrating, or the focus is on the परमवीर चक्र. To create objectivity and distance, and distance the writer from the topic. For example, the usage of बताया जा रहा है कि. I have been doing a few videos recently on the way in which Doordarshan news used to be spoken or used to be delivered at one point of time, and I had been using phrases like बताया जा रहा है कि, या सूत्रों के अनुसार, या हमारे संवाददाता द्वारा खबर दी जा रही है कि, etc. etc. So बताया जा रहा है कि, it creates objectivity and creates distance from the writer, distance from the speaker as well, because this is a little bit off topic, but when you look at the media representations, I don't know if you guys watch Indian channels or not. If you look at the present state of Hindi media or Hindi news channels, or the way they deliver the news, it is not objective, and there is no distance between. As in the subject which is being delivered, the topic which is being delivered, or the information that is being delivered to the audience. There is no distance between that information and the person who is actually speaking or delivering the news. But anyways, the passive the passive creates objectivity, and it creates a little bit of distance. It evokes curiosity. For example, when we say shots were fired, who fired these shots? It's not curiosity in the like the real meaning or the actual meaning of the form curiosity, but a more abstract form of curiosity, linguistic curiosity, as in who exactly is the subject. It is also sometimes the passive is also used to hide the subject, or to lessen the accountability of the subject. But those are, again, these are political nuances of language, and let's not talk about that right now. Then again, it is used to avoid sounding repetitive, because sometimes when we are talking about something, when we have already introduced the subject or the actor of the particular sentence, you don't need to use the subject again and again, and that's why the passive voice is used. Now, obviously, we know the passive voice in Hindi is formed with the perfective participle of the main verb followed by the passive auxiliary jana. जैसे परमवीर चक्र प्रदान किया गया, different forms of जाना. मैंने अखबार पढ़ा, मेरे द्वारा अखबार पढ़ी गई, या अखबार पढ़ा गया, पढ़ाई गया. मैंने खिड़कियां खोली, मेरे द्वारा खिड़कियां खोली गई, and so on and so forth. Now we come to the subjunctives. I think passive and the subjunctives in the lesson plan that you did in the morning, I think all of you have already talked about how a higher register requires the use of passives and subjunctives. Now subjunctives are excuse me. In these examples, हम आपके साथ चलें, चलो बाहर चलें, and आप हमारे साथ पार्टी में चलें. In these three examples, the verb chale is used in three different contexts, and its meaning changes accordingly. In the first sentence, it is used to ask permission. In the second sentence, the speaker is persuading somebody to join him. And the third, there is a polite invitation asking someone to accompany the speaker. Now, we can already see in a subjunctive in the first example where it asks for permission, there is already a power structure involved. There is an authority figure, and you are asking for permission. So automatically, when we are talking with an authority figure, the register will change. The register will become a higher register. The second one is persuading. Whenever you are persuading someone, again, there is a power structure involved. You want the other person to go with you. You want the other person to do something which you want. So therefore, you will use the higher register. You will use the more formal you will use the more formal versions of the language. And finally, there is a polite invitation. Now, again, it's not just an invitation; it's a polite invitation. So politeness, honorification, etc., automatically involve or automatically invoke the higher register of the language. Subjunctive verb forms are generally used to convey desirability, possibility, probability, uncertainty, or a wish about some future action or event. Again, future action and event, हम क्या करें कि विश्व में प्रदूषण कम हो. If that is something that is हमें ऐसा करना चाहिए, हम ऐसा करें, these constructions or these structures will have to be used by the students in order to talk about this, the possibility of future actions, the possibility of future events, which might happen specifically in the context of water conservation and pollution, etc., which you're talking about. Then we have the formation is obviously, it's exactly like the future tense, but we just don't use the ga, gi, and ge, which is omitted. And finally, causative verbs. The first sentence which I had used, कि Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru ने Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru द्वारा भाखड़ा नंगल डैम बनवाया गया था. Now this बनवाया is a causative, is the causative verbal form, because someone, the subject, did not do the action themselves but caused the action to happen. So when that happens, then that is known as the causative verb. For in
Oops, Madri is gone black. Let's see what happens. I'm gonna pick up here. What she's saying here is that, especially when we're talking about it, causatives, it's like we call it the royal mode, where you order someone to do something for you. But when we talk about government setting, when we talk about companies that are hired to do something, then we use this causative type of verb that is formed. We have the chalna, chalana, chalvana. So you can see we have these causative, one is secondary and the other one is tertiary. For example, you gari chalana, but then you gari chalvana. So you see this tertiary where you need an intermediary. She's coming back. So these causative verbs, they come a lot in the context of what we will be working with. And also they are a part of the kind of higher register that speakers use when especially there is a formal type of setting, or when there is this type of context. So Madri, are you back? You can try to, you can.
I just finished it. This is my last slide anyway. So बहुत बाहर storm hai, and because of that reason we have a power cut, and my internet is connected to the power. That's why. So I'm connected via my phone, and that's why I'll not be able to use the.
That's fine. If this is your final slide, I think it's a good way to end with a particular type of verbs. The formation of the verbs is very easy. You all know it. It's just something that we rarely come to teach our students, because we don't get to that level of sophistication of language that we teach our students, but yet we are gonna have to think about it and maybe teach it at a lower level, because it's an unavoidable language feature for the kind of context we are working with. Okay. So do you have closing remarks, or do we open to questions, Madri?
No, I actually had a set of, a video which I wanted to show, and just a 2-minute video, but again, I can't show it right now because.
Can you send it to me? Do you have it
Yeah,
handy?
no, but it's a very long video, and of that I had to show the middle. I think I can screen grab it and send it to you.
Okay.
I'll send you the link. I'll send you the link. It is
Let's try.
actually something which there was a lecture which I had given about Bhasha ka. It's here. I am back. The power is back. I mean.
Do rejoin. In the meantime, if you have, so far I get comments that the presentation is awesome, but are there any questions?
Okay.
I want
I'll
to
just
ask.
try and join.
Sarfaraz, hi,
Yes,
Sarfaraz
Yes,
is our tech guy. We will be working with him and with Milinji in terms of using some technological tools and putting things on that. Sarfaraz, what is your question?
It's not a question, it's a request. Madri, you've done really well. It's very difficult to teach this kind of superior language in the classroom. And it's like you're discussing how to handle these things. It's great, and I really enjoyed the presentation. Though I joined in the middle of it, I wanted you to. I mean, if it is possible, can you share an experience where you would like teaching these things in your classroom? Maybe like Hindi, English, whatever. What was your experience? What kind of problem you faced, and how did you handle those issues? If there was some, if you can recall something. When I can wait, you can think about it and take other questions in the meantime, if you need some time to think.
Yeah, I probably will, because I haven't had. Actually, the thing is, I haven't thought, but I did. This is something which I.
Madri is
because this is not.
Madri, you're
Sorry?
cutting off. I will answer here. Let me tell you this. Heritage learners have a problem working with passive, because they can do khana ban raha hai versus khana banaya ja raha hai. And when they do filme banti hai with ease, they're like, why do I need passive? So that's why we need to be aware as language teachers, when we have this higher register, then we gotta push for the use of these structures. And very, very often with heritage language learners, subjunctive, they know, but they prefer to use the sakna. Ab wahan ja sakte hain, ye kar sakte hain, un logon se mil sakte hain, versus wahan milein, wahan jaएं, wahan ghumeं. So it's very, they know the structure, they know the language unit, but there is a level of comfort that they go back to, which is at the lower level of language sophistication. So Sarfaraz, I'm answering for Madri, she seems to be back. I have certain issues with that, but with foreign language learners, the issue is subjunctive is not an English feature, English language feature. It is there. Each student, it is required that each student go to the registrar. This is subjunctive, but they're not aware of it, and they struggle with the simple subjunctive. But the passive, because they have it in English, they use it in English, so it's not an issue. So these are issues that I know we are all going to face or are facing. Madri, do you want to add something?
When I was at NYU, when with you, ways in which we thought the passive was to use
we cannot hear you, Rajni. Madri, so sorry. It seems that your electricity ruined everything. But let's hear more questions if you have, or more reactions. Anyone else? Yes, Milinji?
This presentation is so awesome. Couple of years ago, I was teaching intermediate Hindi at Sasli. And the course which was designed, this goes a little bit beyond it, much beyond that. So I was thinking if you can get the presentation.
Oh, yes. The presentation will be shared on Google Docs.
Thank you so much.
Okay, am I
Madri ji,
audible
awesome.
now? Am I audible now?
You are,
Because
you
I
are.
am connected. Okay, I am connected using the internet. The internet is back, thank God. Anyways, what I was trying to say that when we were in when I was at NYU, one of the ways in which we taught the usage of the passive was to use the Swatantrata Divas ka commentary, and that had the usage of passive in a huge way. So what I think is when the student is given a formal setting, and this is something which I'm like, if I am asked, or if the student is asked to, we eventually asked our students to imagine that they are the ones doing the commentary, and mute the video and do the commentary themselves. Abhi घोड़े आ रहे हैं, अभी ये चल रहा है, and then when the Paramveer Chakra etc was presented, several of the students did in fact end up using the passive form. So I think when we give them a formal setting, they will probably use it, because in normal settings we do not use the passive ourselves. So ho sakta hai ki if we give them a higher register challenge, and I think that's what Gabi ji did with our students, like when I was there as her assistant, that we did give them a formal setup where they could use the structure, and that's why they used it at that point of time. So yeah, if I'm to answer
This is the so-called raft. We are gonna talk about it later. It's but
Okay.
just now, just to let you know, this is the role that you give the student, the audience that you give the student, the format that you give the student, and the topic. So in the context of raft, you can spiral up the student performance in order to have them include higher register features of the language. Rachna had her hand first, and then Patrika will get her turn as well. Patrika is playing with the icons. I don't know, there was a crying face. I hope you don't feel like that.
It was a mistake, sorry. It had to be a happy one.
Okay, Rachna, go ahead. And then in the meantime, Patrika will fix her face. Go ahead, Rachna.
Thank you, Madri, for this wonderful presentation. I'm actually learning and taking notes as I was going, because this is very new to me. And it made me think. I'm a high school teacher here in Chandler, Arizona, and I'm a science teacher. So I see a lot of these language usage, by high school students, which are basically curse words ranging from stupid to F, whatever. So would you consider that nowadays in generation, which is very commonly used by the students, is it an idealect, a socialect, or a style?
Okay, if the student, if we look at when we look at every particular, like, can you hear me? Am I unmuted? Okay, because that is usually something which I do, that I mute myself and then keep talking. But anyways, when we look at an individual student and when we look at their usage, obviously it becomes an idiolect. But altogether, when we are looking at the group of students, because it is a particular social group, it is the group of students which is actually doing the work. So that becomes a sociolect. Like I said, the same language has these versions. So these are the abstract versions. Like, remember when Plato said that there is an abstract idea of a table, and whatever other tables that you have in the world, these are all versions of the same table. So in that way, there is an abstract idea of a language, and all these, the sociolects, the idiolects, and the styles and registers, all of these are the different versions of the same language. So when you look at the language used by a group of people, even if it is limited to the one particular school and one particular age group and one particular class, we can talk about it as a sociolect. But the moment we look at it at an individual level, it becomes an idiolect. And personally speaking, I love curse words a lot, because I think they are very raw representations. Like, I have a very active social media platform, and I avoid using any slang words or any words which are not, these unparliamentary words, actually. because I have my students on in my EA, but personally speaking, I actually really love and I like to look at curse words and how they develop and how they are actually mirrors of the different ways in society, the different relationships of power structures in a society, right?
Yeah, and it's funny because we're in my class especially, and I tell them that my idiosyncrasies, that I come from India, I don't let my kids use these curse words. And then these Americans go, Miss Nath, and I have a policy that if they say a curse word during their conversations of the day in my class, they have two options. The first option is they have to write 50 rhyming words that goes with that word, and we'll come up with an idea of what to use instead of the word stupid or idiot or shut up, whatever. If they don't want to do that, they can pay me $1, and it's in my syllabus, and $1 is used to feed all of my numerous animals that I have in my classroom. So they have a choice. But there is one student a few years back who said, Miss Nat, can you give me a list of all the ideas that will cause me to give you $1? I said, if you think that it's going to offend me, put it in your list. Right? So yeah. And I still do it. 6 years after, I still do it. And then, oh my God, what did I just say? And they become more and more conscious. And, you know, and I tell them why I'm like that and why I have idiosyncrasies against kicking the backpack because, you know, I come from a Hindu religion. You'd never kick books.
Yes. You don't do, yes, absolutely.
They start to appreciate it. They start to appreciate it once they learn where we come from. And if we are communicative enough and we tell them why, they start to respect it. So
you have a way to raise awareness, and that's the most important part, because raising awareness is the step that every speaker needs to take in order to be in control, in a better control and better understanding of what they produce. Patrika?
Great presentation, Madri. Really learned a lot.
Thank you.
I have a question. So what I understood was that idiolect and style is unique to each person, right? So my question is, how are they related with each other? Like idiolect and style, do they have some relationship with each other? I mean, you did answer part of it when you were answering Rachna's question, that they're all these things are a part of the language, but I just want to know if there is some direct relationship between the two, or if they influence each other.
From my understanding, like, you know, there are different schools of thought, and then people might say that this is not exactly, it doesn't fall within the exact linguistic definitions of style and idiolects. But what I understand is style is a part of, is what makes up, is something which makes up idiolects as well. Because idiolect ultimately is a person's individual way of using the sounds of the language, the morphology of the language, the syntactical structure, even intonations and tones and intonations, and you know, the different prosodic features of the language itself. All of this together, they make up one individual person's, in all the cultural idiosyncrasies. Like, for example, sometimes people also have takiya kalams, right? All of you probably have heard about takiya kalam. So takiya kalam is also something which is a part of a person's idiolect. So all of
Give
this.
Give an example for a takiya kalam.
सूरमा भोपाली का जो नहीं था, सूरमा भोपाली ऐसे ही नहीं कहते. So that is something that is a takiya kalam. Another one, like
is a takiya kalam, which is very common.
Like in English, like is a takiya kalam. I was like, you know, like etc. So like is a takiya kalam. So these are individual. So all of these things together, the conscious choice of sounds, the conscious choice of words, the syntactic structure, etc., all of them together make up an idiolect. Style, on the other hand, is little bit, sometimes it's more of a written style, more of a written, it's reflective, it's reflected more in your written structure, practice rather than your spoken practice. I'll give you the joke which I wanted to share, which I could not because the electricity gave me dhoka, was the one which I talked about in Gulzar, when Gulzar says this. So this simple sentence called pani pila do. Okay? Simple sentence, pani pila do. Normal people, how do you say pani pila do? Gulzar will say, Ruh meri sukhi padi hai kai umr se, लब पे प्याला चांद का टपका दे कोई. The same sentence, पानी पिला दो. How will Dinkar say it? मूर्छित जिह्वा अनुरोध करती मांगती है नीर, तोड़कर जंजीरों को कदम बढ़ाओ वीर. Nirala, on the other hand, will say, पानी तू बर्तन पे बिछकर बर्तन ही बन जाता है, फिर मेरे प्यासे गले तक क्यों नहीं तू आता है. So those of you who are familiar with Dinkar's writing and Nirala's writing, you can see that, oh, this is very similar to how Dinkar has actually written or Nirala has actually written in his life. And so that these are obviously not written by these people, right? By the original people, but the style was somebody could imitate the choice of words, imitate the choice of the syllables, the falling of syllables, the way meters are made in poetry. Somebody could imitate that. And why could they do it? Because these specific writers have a specific style of writing, have an idiolect of themselves, which can be imitated. I hope I am clear. I ramble a lot.
No. This was very nice explanation. So that brings me to the point then. So idiolect is formed of it's not influenced just by the style, but also then the sociolect, register style, all of them form the idiolect of a person, right?
Everything, yes. So whatever goes into, it might be something which a person's idiolect might be affected by one factor and another person's might not be affected by that factor. But it depends on every person. For example, the usage of curse words like Rachna ma'am was saying that why does someone decide or choose to use curse words and someone doesn't? And maybe she has students in her class who don't use these curse words, don't use stupid, or don't use derogatory words and unparliamentary words in a classroom setting or with their friends. Why don't they do it? So there are factors, not just social factors, like not familial factors are maybe there. Maybe they see this language being used around them, and that is what is affecting them. So depend karta hai, like it's all very like idiolects are very subjective. You need to look at an individual person and what exactly is affecting them in order to figure out what their conscious choices as far as the language is concerned.
And because we're a little going behind schedule, Fiona has one last question, which is, do we consider body language when talking about idiolects? Madri, this is your last chance to answer quickly.
Okay. Yes, we do.
Okay, there you go. Socioeconomic status, exactly. How about the meeting with Madriji when we go to India? She will be, yes, Milinji, she will